everyone, welcome back to Field Stories. My name is Nick Smith and I'm here with Chris Katova. How are you doing, mate? What's been going on?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm tired and surviving, to be honest. Feeling a little under the weather today as well, but that's standard field work, right? Um, yeah, it's been. I mean, last week we talked about where we are in this field site, and it's awesome. I mean, it's like honestly incredible, but it's a lot of work. It's like a different type of challenge here because Nick as well as anyone, the lowlands, 200 meters above sea level in the Amazon, it's just brutal heat, and you just die of the heat. You can't escape the heat, and that's the challenge. That's what you fight against, right? So here, even though we're only like a 4-hour drive away, now we're up at like 900 meters, and up. And now the challenge is actually the temperature is perfect. It's amazing, but it's beautiful. But the challenge here is just the climbing. We're going up mountains like up and down all the time. And if I tell someone that we climb 400 meters, you'd say, "Oh, that's nothing." But 400 meters, when you have to do checks of bird nets 4 or 5 times in the morning, and you're in a hurry up and down, it's a challenge. It's draining us for sure. So
just going up and down stairs, right? You're
yeah,
going
they aren't even good because they're muddy. It's been raining, and you're like slipping, and like, oh yeah. So I'm not complaining, and I think I'd take this over the heat sometimes. But yeah, it's a drain. We're definitely feeling it today. The whole team's like a little tired, but tomorrow morning we're gonna take the whole team up to the very top of this whole conservation area. It's gonna be over 2,000 meters when we get there. So we got about 1,000-meter climb tomorrow. So, yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a challenge. It'll be all day. We'll be in the field for like 14 hours. So yeah, it's good. I mean, right now I have to apologize in advance to any of the viewers or listeners that it probably sounds like I'm somewhere between like a lawnmower and like a kitchen in New York or something. I am in the back between our like dining room area. So there's like dishes being washed, people eating. It's a generator over here. And yeah, I mean, that's, it's not like we have a studio on Field Stories. We're all just living our life, working where we are.
Editing because I can't hear it on there. So it's definitely not the noise reduction button in the app. I'm just going to claim really good editing because no one will notice.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely everything that you did and nothing the app did, so that's true.
Yeah. The app sucks. We've talked about that before, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I noticed that you have color in your face and that you have heat behind you.
Flourishing. Look at this. I've got some natural light. I haven't seen natural light for about 3 months.
Yeah. Happening.
No, it's great. Yeah, I'm at my mum's house, and they're away in Canada having a great time. So I'm manning the place, I guess, just looking after it. And yeah, it's got space. I'm not just confined to a little basement in my uni accommodation. It's really bliss. I feel like I'm on some sort of relaxation resort or something, just because I feel place for myself, just chilling. Right on. Some of the viewers will be familiar with Dartmoor. It's in Devon, just a nice open moorland area. It's beautiful. So I live right near there. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Can't complain.
And how's it been going? I noticed you posted some content recently and taking some photos. How's everything going for you in school and work and everything?
Yeah, really good. I'm balancing everything. So I'm in the middle of doing a film on great crested grebes where I'm essentially doing the life cycle of them. So I've got captured footage all the way from their courtship dance where they do the penguin dance or the weed courtship, all the way through them being on the nest with tending to the eggs and then finishing off with the chicks on their back and feeding and different things. So I've got all of that footage. I'm trying to compile it into, I'm in the hard editing stage, which any filmmakers out there, you'll understand. It's the worst part, trying to compile everything together and make it sound good. The sound's so important for it.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It sounds fun. I guess we should talk about Michaela as well. Unfortunately, Michaela she's still transitioning to her new job, and she's traveling. And you can imagine moving. Well, I guess by the standards of Europe, it's basically moving across the whole continent. If you move from Michigan to Massachusetts, yeah, you would just be you'd be in like 6 countries away if you moved as far as she moved. By the standards of North America, it's not that far, but by European standards, she's moved to another universe. So, yeah, it's a transition. So she's just not able to join us, especially because it's complicated. She's in one time zone, I'm an hour different, and then we're 6 hours different from you. And so, yeah, she's not able to join us today. She's here in spirit, but yeah, hopefully next week all our schedules will line up and we can have her back. And we miss you, Michaela, and hope everything's going well. And can't wait to reach you soon. So
we're gonna have to have a host episode just to catch up with everyone, because it's been a little bit. You know, we need to fight together and come back.
We'll have to do that before I go to Canada if possible. We'll see.
Yeah, before I go to Suriname as well. So we've got
exactly.
We've got some things upcoming, and Michaela's going to be constantly in the field during that time. So are you. So
there'll be some episodes where maybe it's just one of us. We'll see, but we'll make it work. So
none of us. We'll just put blank air on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, without further ado, I guess we should get to this week's episode. Yeah. So we've got Emma on, and again, I'm not going to try to say this last name. It's a little bit. There's stuff that I feel like you know your limitations in pronouncing some of these last names, especially as I haven't heard her say it. Not going to happen. So yeah, Emma's I think, a really good guest. She's a researcher who's worked with and working with orangutans. And so I guess we'll let the episode get to it. She's someone that actually both you and myself don't really know well. I'm really excited to meet her and to know about her work and just learn more about her and orangutans in general.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really excited for it too. Like we said, the fact that we don't know her means that the questions are going to be a little bit more natural, if you like. So we won't actually have heard anything beforehand. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, let's go. All right, so our guest this week is Emma, and I'm not going to try to say the last name because I feel like just like German or other last names, I'll probably butcher it, so I'm going to save that. She can explain her last name. She's an orangutanologist, which I love that. I probably didn't properly, but I really love that. That's awesome. That's a great title. She's worked in the past with orangutans that have been rehabilitated to be released in the wild and studied them as well. And basically, I'll let her introduce herself. But this is just for our listeners and viewers. A lot of times, our guests are sort of friends or acquaintances of myself or Nick or Michaela. And in this case, Emma is kind of new to all of us and someone that I've seen on Instagram and really respected the content she's put out there and the work she's doing, and reached out to her, and she was, gracious enough to join us and share some of her time and her stories with us. So I guess, for myself and Nick and Michaela, wherever she is watching, we'll really enjoy getting to know Emma, and we're really excited. So thank you, Emma, for taking the time. And we're really interested to learn more about you and the work you've been doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll just start with a general introduction. Yeah. My name is Emma Lokuciejewski. It's a Polish last name, so a lot of people can't pronounce that, but that's no worries. I'm from the UK, but I now live in Germany. I'm studying for my PhD. I also work in Indonesia, so I'm kind of all over the place. But basically, I call myself an orangutanologist. There's lots of different words that you could use, like a primatologist or spatial ecologist, depending on what kind of research you do. But I'm all about the orangutans, so that's why I named myself an orangutanologist. So people know exactly what I do.
I love it.
I knew from a young age I was so interested in primates and orangutans in particular. There was just something that I found so cool about them and so interesting. So from quite early on, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. As soon as I knew that could be a job of some way, that's what I worked towards. So from my studies, I always did like the scientific route, and I went to a lot of biology classes and things like that. And then at university, I did my bachelor's degree in evolutionary biology. So that had a lot of kind of animal behavior parts to it as well. And then I moved on to my master's degree, which was a master's by research. So it's kind of like a mini PhD where you just do your own study. So that's where I worked with BOSS Foundation, which is Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, which is the organization that rescues orangutans, usually from the pet trade. They go through like a rehabilitation center where they learn all these survival skills that their mother would have taught them. Once they have these skills, they're then reintroduced into the wild. And my study was to see whether these reintroduced orangutans can actually behave as a wild one should, despite all of their traumatic past and the human interactions. So overall, they do quite well. There's lots of different rehabilitation centres. They all have kind of slightly different methods in the way they do this. But overall, it works. And these orangutans are surviving. So it shows how adaptable they are and that they can, like, this conservation effort does actually work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, that was an epic introduction. That's really cool. Um, I wonder if you know Jonah actually, because he's done his work with Boss. He came on Jonah, who came on the podcast. He's done his filming out with Boss before, and he's been there quite a lot. So if not, definitely have to meet him with that one.
Yeah,
So,
I'll have to connect. Yeah, I'm not sure I've heard of the name, but yeah, maybe we've crossed paths somewhere.
yeah, definitely. We're going to have a crossover episode here with the same
Yeah.
reactors. Yeah, I guess my the question that I would have is what what job role are you specifically doing yourself when you're out there, and what sort of involved in a day-to-day basis?
So I'm currently studying for my PhD, which is with a different organisation now. So instead of on the island of Borneo, I'm now on Sumatra, studying the wild orangutans. So these are the ones that are completely wild, never had any human interaction. So it's kind of like a difference in that kind of structure, but I do the same behavioural work basically. A lot of these different orangutan research organisations, we all take the same type of data so that then it can be compared in different studies. So I basically take behavioural data of the wild orangutans. And my PhD in particular is looking at how the juvenile orangutans develop and learn. So once they've left their mother and they're developing into adulthood, how they continue to develop these skills and become an adult in that kind of teenage stage of their life.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's cool. That's really awesome. Yeah, I guess I have obviously quite a few questions. But first one I'll get to is in terms of the work you've done with the rehabilitated orangutans and putting them back to the wild. I mean, what challenges? I mean, I think I could think of a few myself, but you can explain it better. What challenges are there? What are the biggest hurdles that they face to being able to survive in the wild without that natural, learning from their parents? What are the biggest challenges they face?
Orangutans have like this super long dependency phase where they stay with their mother for 8 years. And then it's just one orangutan, and then after that 8 years, the mother will then have a new baby, which kind of pushes their independence. So they have this whole 8 years of just them with their mother, and she will teach them basically all of the survival skills they need, like what fruits to eat, how to avoid things like a poisonous snake. She will basically teach them everything. Some orangutans that are captured for their pet trade, they're captured super young, like maybe even 1 year old. So they're still tiny babies and they can't survive themselves. So humans will raise them as a human child. So they often give them the wrong foods, they give them the wrong kind of care. And these orangutans then don't have any knowledge of what a wild orangutan should be doing. So from that stage, they just don't know how to survive. So that's why this rehabilitation centre needs to teach them that, basically, because they would have no way of surviving otherwise.
Yeah, and I guess if you could maybe build on that a little bit, like how is that done then? I mean, what are the? I mean, I guess we can imagine it, but like specifically on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month kind of basis, how does that learn? Especially, when I'm thinking about it, I'm assuming these orangutans, if they're taken from their parents at a year or a mother at a year of age, they're not necessarily taken back right away. They might be 5 years old when they're taken back, or 6 or whatever. So obviously, the older they get, the more ingrained their behavior is. So I'm sure that trying to sort of teach them new things is even more challenging as they're older. So maybe if you can explain a bit more about what that sort of daily life is like for training them.
Yeah, so these orangutans usually stay in this rehabilitation centre until they're like 10 or 12 years old. So it's quite a long time.
Yeah.
So they basically have different stages depending on ages. And usually there's a lot of orangutans that need to be rescued. So there's a lot of these young orangutans together. So they use like forest schools. So they have like different age groups or skill groups. So they'll have like a baby section where these tiny orangutans will learn just basic things like climbing and building their strength up. And then the next group will be ones that go into the forest and learn to climb higher in the trees and try and get different fruits and things like that. And then they'll have like social interaction lessons or like predator avoidance lessons. So it's kind of like a school that humans teach them these skills as much as they could do, basically.
That's really cool.
All I'm saying is I'm dropping out of uni and going to forest school. It sounds way better.
Yeah, it looks so fun.
That's epic. Yeah, so I can imagine there's a lot of challenges alongside all of this, because I can imagine if within a 10-year period, I could imagine there being a lot of staff changes, a lot of government changes, maybe, or different things that are going to affect something over a course of a 10-year period from an orangutan, sorry, going from a baby to being able to be rehabilitated and released. So I don't know if you want to delicately talk about some of the challenges that approach with or you have on a daily basis with that side of things.
Yeah, on like the larger scale of that, Indonesia can be quite a difficult place. There's a lot of political things that go on there that maybe other people don't agree with. But yeah, some of these rehabilitation centres have been closed down, maybe because there's not enough money, or some of them kind of transitioned into more of like a tourist site, which obviously was negative, affecting the orangutans. So they kind of shut down in that way. So it really depends on the management, I think, of making these like a sustainable long-term thing, for the benefit of the orangutans as well, because it takes them so long to learn these skills that it needs to be a very stable rehabilitation centre. But yeah, it can be difficult, and some of them haven't worked out, but there are some that definitely do work.
There must be quite a lot of staff education involved in. Is there a certain period of time you have to do like an internship or volunteer before you can actually get involved? Because I could imagine the treatment of them has to be consistent throughout, I'd imagine, right? So
Yeah.
being able to keep that consistency over a 10-year period must be really, really difficult, actually.
Yeah, the majority of people who work there are local people that will come from the surrounding villages. Usually it's women that do the care of the orangutans in these forest schools. As in Indonesian culture, the women love children. They're all very like family orientated. So it kind of comes naturally for them to take care of these young ones. So they're mainly the ones that are bringing these orangutans into the forest and teaching them all these different skills. They try not to have too many like international students coming and going and
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Just keep it stable, that they recognize and they know these few people who teach them.
that's nice.
Yeah, that's good. That's very interesting. It makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess this is often. I feel like I'm stealing your question, Nick, but yeah, a lot of times Nick will ask something along the lines of, what's your favorite animal? And I think in this case, we don't really need to ask that. I think it's kind of obvious. I guess what I want to know is, yeah, I mean, from your perspective, I guess why have you chosen to devote your life really to orangutans? I mean, the answers could be obvious, but maybe for you, there's more personal reasons, or maybe there's other things that really caught your eye and gave you this passion for this species in this area. So yeah, maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, they're just, I think the thing that was appealed to me in the beginning was that how interesting they are. They're so like careful and delicate, the way they do things, the way they move, the way they interact with different objects. You can even see it in a zoo, for example. They won't just be like sat there eating. They're always looking on at something or figuring something out or doing up some kind of enrichment activity. Their brain is constantly so active, but in the way that they're just so delicate with it, and so like unlike a chimp, which would probably be like screaming and throwing things around, they're just so chilled, and it's just really nice to see. And they're so interesting. You can tell when you look at them that they're also thinking back at you as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's really
On
cool.
the back of Chris's question with that, what does the future of a orangologist? Like, I'm not sure if I said that right. What's the future look like for the industry? No, but what so for you personally, what are you looking to, I guess, achieve long term, or maybe look at further projects yourself once you've completed your PhD? So where are you heading next, essentially?
I always like to link it back to conservation things, as they are a critically endangered species. I feel like we have that kind of moral responsibility to do something about that and to help them in some way. So even if I'm doing behavioural research on these juvenile orangutans, you can always link that to conservation. So I can see how these young ones learn, and that could be then applied to these rehabilitation centres to show that there's certain ages where they learn these particular skills best, or that they learn better from other individuals or their friends and things like that. So everything you do can be linked to conservation, and I think that it should be wherever applicable as well.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And that's great.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, I guess one final question on my end would be, you mentioned, you kind of alluded to the difference between orangutan behavior and chimps, and yeah, maybe you could build on that a little bit more in terms of their, not just their yeah, you mentioned that they're slightly more gentle generally, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot about the detailed behavior of the other great apes basically, but yeah, maybe you could build a bit upon that, on their behavior, their social structure. Just more of a, I guess we could, Wikipedia this, but we have an expert here on the show, so
Yeah.
I'd rather ask, take advantage of it. So maybe, yeah, you could go a little bit more about their behavior and compare them a little bit to the other, well-known great ape species in Africa.
Yeah, so the other great apes are all very social. They live in social groups. Orangutans are semi-solitary, so they're usually on their own. Sometimes they encounter another individual. If they do, sometimes they're just not bothered. They just carry on doing their own thing. There just happens to be another one nearby. And sometimes they will actually go and interact with each other. But it's very relaxed and very flexible, rather than having these super chaotic groups where there's like a dominance hierarchy and things like that. They're just, if they want to interact, they will. If they don't, they'll just turn the other way.
And that's
So
so
it's quite
interesting.
different in that respect.
That's so
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I guess so. That's really interesting. You mentioned that, and that the other, and I mean, on us as well, we're generally social, right? So, do you know, or is there a hypothesis about why orangutans have evolved to be sort of the less social of those great apes? Because it's an interesting behavior in that way.
Yeah, I think it's linked to like fruit availability. If there's not as much fruit around, there's less competition if you're in a group. I think it's linked to that basically.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. It's quite a contrasting behavior when you think about it. So
Yeah,
that's really.
really.
I want. I suppose also, orangutans maybe, again, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps they have less, I guess, geographical area to work with as well, being that they're more restricted to islands. I mean, because I know that again, literally, our guest last week was talking about that some in birds, for example, it's often behavior has shown that a lot of species work together more in times of lack of food, which is interesting. So, and obviously we see that with chimps and gorillas too, that, even though there might be less food, but then maybe the difference, I don't know, I'm just thinking here, maybe the difference is that obviously, being in Africa, they have a lot of room to move. Not all species, of course. Some are restricted, especially now after human alteration of habitat. But naturally, they would have potentially had more room, and certainly humans move. So I wonder, do you think there's a possibility that the more island nature of their habitat has had something to do with that as well?
Yeah, that definitely could, because Indonesia is full of so many different islands. I think historically orangutans did range as far as China, so they did have a big range at one point, but over the
But
past however long, yeah, they've definitely declined in size.
yeah, it would be interesting. I don't know if you know. It'd be interesting to know if the social behavior was any different in a mainland area versus the island area. Yeah, well, really interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but these things are really interesting for me.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in the fact that they're the only great ape outside of Africa, right?
Yeah,
So it's fascinating how that's come about and the evolution.
yeah,
They filled a niche that was obviously
yeah, they
needed.
definitely did. Yeah,
It's fascinating, really is fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, great. I think at this stage we'll probably ask you for one of your orangutan stories, or it doesn't
yeah,
obviously doesn't have to be orangutan based, but based on, I would imagine it probably will be. But
yeah.
yeah, so if you'd like to head off with the story, it would be great. We're really interested.
Yeah, so last year I spent basically all of that year doing field work for my PhD. That was in North Sumatra with the Sumatran orangutans, the fully wild ones. So for that behavioral data, we would just basically follow them all day, taking data on what they're doing, what they're eating, if they're interacting with anyone, and that kind of thing. You learn a lot about the orangutans. They all have their own like personalities and things like that. There was one time when I was following a female. She's maybe like 15 years old, so she's kind of getting into that adult stage now. So we're just following her, taking behavioural data, and then started to behave a bit differently, and we were a bit confused as to why she was acting like this. So she was like doing this kiss squeak vocalization, which is like when they're scared of something, or if another one's too close and they want them to go away. It's that kind of behavior. So we just retreated a bit. We moved a bit back because maybe she was intimidated by us, the observers. So we moved back, and then she was kept doing it. So we were like, that's a bit strange. So we just carried on taking the data, because sometimes that happens. We just take the data on what they're doing that day. And then
Cool.
we kept looking at her through the binoculars, because we were quite a distance away by this stage. And she was kind of looking down from the trees. So she was like looking over and looking down. And then we were like, that's a bit strange. She's looking at something on the floor there. And then she started throwing branches, like snapping them off and throwing them down. So we were like, oh, she's clearly doesn't like something that's on the floor over there. So then that kind of clicked. We were like, oh, she's scared of something. Maybe we should be scared of something.
Yeah.
You should learn from the orangutans. They know their voice better than I ever will. So we just kind of moved back a bit. We kept quiet, kept having a look around, seeing if there was anything there. She kept going. We thought, yeah, there's definitely something there. We'll move. So we moved in like a semicircle around her. We started to have a break. We went for lunch just to give her a break, just to see if maybe it was us that she was scared of or something. But she kept going. She kept making these vocalizations, shaking the trees and throwing branches down. So we just decided to move back, and we just went away and we had a rest. And then we were sat down and we heard something in the distance, some kind of footsteps. There's not many mammals that walk on the floor in Sumatra. The only one that does is a tiger.
Oh,
I was gonna say,
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Wow.
So that was quite scary. We just immediately went back to camp then. We were not staying around for that.
yeah,
It's a nice
wow.
lesson to learn, that you should definitely trust the nature.
Yeah,
You should trust what they think.
God,
Wow.
wow, that's
Yeah.
insane. That's an encounter and a half.
Yeah. Did you ever have any other close encounters of the tiger that way, or was that the only time so far that you've had that?
In that month, there was quite a few sightings from other people, or hearing the vocalizations or footprints. So we know that there is a female in that area, and we think at that time she'd had cubs as well, which happens like every 5 or so years. We get this like sighting again. So we're definitely within the range of her. So we think it was most probably her, and maybe she was looking at the orangutan, and obviously the orangutan was scared of her. So yeah, she must have been
Wow.
there.
Sorry, can I just ask, is it in the Bukit Lawang area, or is it a different...
It's in a slightly different area. It's within that same national park, but it's more on the east side.
Is that the Gunung Lusa?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
How often is it known how often tigers actually feed on juvenile orangs? Is it regular or is it rare?
I think it's quite rare, just because of how high they are in the trees. In Sumatra, the orangutans always stay in the canopy. On Borneo, where there isn't any tigers, they will kind of come lower in the trees and maybe come to the floor. But yeah, the Sumatran ones, they're always definitely high in the trees for that reason.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
I know your specialty is orangutans, but I am now curious. Do you know roughly on a population estimate of the Sumatran tiger in that well, I guess across the country, but specifically in Gunung Lusa? I am specifically interested because I've been invited out there, so I'm very curious about getting as much information as possible.
I think they're very rare in general. They're very endangered. But all of the local people I've spoken to have at some point seen one. So they're definitely in that area, but it's just they're so elusive, and they often hunt at night, so people don't really come into contact with them.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's that must have been quite an interesting experience. Was that what time of the day was that? Was that near the end of the day, or was that morning, or what time of the day did you have that encounter?
It was in the middle of the day. Yeah, it's quite strange. We were very usually we kind of keep an eye out on an evening or early morning, because that's when they're most active. But yeah, we were quite shocked to see one at that time.
I was gonna say, because it'd be a lot. I think a bit more intimidating to have it like at dusk, right before dark or something. Yeah,
it's always scary in the dark. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was great, Emma. Thank you so much. The work you're doing is super fascinating, super important, and I really liked what you said about bringing the research you're doing back to conservation and ways to help this species, because, as you said, they're so critically endangered. So that's really awesome. And yeah, definitely keep up the good work, obviously in your studies and your work, but also in social media as well. And yeah, we'll make sure to share your Instagram handle when we post this episode. And yeah, I very give make sure to give Emma a follow. Really interesting content out there and great work she's doing. So yeah, thank you so much, Emma, for taking the time to join us. We really enjoyed it. It was great to meet you and learn more about the work you're doing and learn more about these awesome animals.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Oh. All right. Well, yeah, that was great. It's awesome having Emma on the show. And yeah, I guess maybe we need to reach out and have more guests on that we've never really spoken to before. It gives us lots of questions and content and things that we want to know. So hopefully the listeners and viewers also want to know as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's not done anything to help me avoid going to Sumatra. I was supposed to be there in March, and feels like I've missed out on a little bit, actually. I could have been the third Orangutanologist member or something.
I feel like we're probably going to need to devote like every 1 or 2 months an episode to orangutans at this point. It seems like they're becoming the mascot of the show. Maybe we'll get Michaela to change the logo, to orangutan.
Yeah, we need a big orangutan in that logo. But it's great. No, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, what she was talking about it's really cool. It's great to get different perspectives as well, because as a researcher, she's looking at different things to Jonah, who we had on, who was looking at it from a content creation and trying to an outreach point of view. Completely different fields of work, and it's really interesting to hear the differences. Really. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. It just shows you, conservation is a very multifaceted field, and it has a lot of angles, and they're all important. And yeah, no, that was super cool, super cool. She was a really interesting guest and really cool perspective. And yeah, there's, as I said in the interview too, there's just so many questions still, even for animals like that, even for species that are pretty well known and pretty iconic, that there's still so many questions about their life, their behavior we don't know. So really fascinating. Really enjoyed that interview. That was awesome. So
yeah, well, I know you were particularly interested in the social structures and why it's different from other great apes. I think that's a question that can be explored in more depth for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that's actually really interesting. And it's random timing that last week we had a Tori on talking about bird behavior and social response to lack of food and resources, and then you see the opposite sort of extreme there, so potentially at least, so it's animal behavior, wildlife ecology, biology, it's all so complicated, and that's why we love it, right? So it's super cool.
Evolving, it's great. Well, I think, one last point I want to make is how cool is Instagram, by the way? We like to slate it from time to time, but how damn cool is it? I mean, I've not met Michaela myself, just through Instagram. We've become very good friends. Obviously, we've had a couple other people on the podcast who are just through Instagram. People find your Fauna Forever and yourself through Instagram. I find work through Instagram. It's pretty damn incredible, actually.
It is true. You're totally right. We slag off on social media a lot because we know that there are negative side effects of it. But I guess, social media is just an extension of humanity, right? Which is to say there's good and there's bad. So when you use it for the good, it's really good and really powerful. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you're right. Like, I only know Michaela as well. The long lost departed Michaela, our former co-host. I'm kidding. Yeah. So no, it's great. It's true. It's got a lot of good side, a lot of upside when you use it properly.
Yeah, no, 100%. But yeah, I think in terms of orangutans, we're really pushing the envelope out on them. We're going to be setting up our own PhD, I think, in terms of orangutan research. So we'll see what we can get.
Yeah. Well, I think we should probably wrap this up before the sounds of the kitchen in the background overwhelm the viewers. It sounds like there's literally like piles of dishes being washed as I speak on the other side of this wall here. So yeah, we're gonna probably wrap it up and
piles of dishes that I haven't washed up yet over there. So
you're just gonna send to Peru, yeah. So all right, well, take care, Nick, and maybe we'll see you, and maybe we'll see Michaela next week. Who knows?
No, I think hopefully we will. She's doing great, so looking forward to seeing what she's been up to.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, man.
See you later, everyone.
Ciao.
Have a good one. Bye.